Greetings, life management students. Let's talk about what it takes to be a successful student. Something that I believe is right up all of your alley. I think you're all doing a great job so far. So a successful student, a student that is going to, receive good grades at school and be successful. Number one is reading. We'll talk a little bit about how you need to read for success. You need to know how to take notes because you have to get the information that your instructor shares with you into your head somehow. And so we need to learn to take notes. We need to study those notes or memorize them and study for exams, right? We want to be able to learn how to get over test anxiety and how to do well on exams. And then we need to know what we call information literacy. It sounds fancy, but really what it means, information literacy means where do we find good information? So when you just Google something, that's not always the best way to find information because anybody can put something on the internet. When we look for information as a student, we're looking for valid information that was, provided by a scholar, by researchers who did a study. We want to make sure that we have the right information. So let's look at what all this looks like. So steps to active reading. Number one is we kind of have to get mentally prepared. If my mom has this really weird habit that she will read a book while she's watching TV. So she has the TV on, she's reading a book, and I'm like, Mom, how do you focus? Because I can't do that. I cannot do two things at the same time. If I'm going to read, I have to be an active reader. And so we have to mentally get ready that, okay, I'm going to put away distractions. I'm going to do what I need to do to be able to read and read with focus. Okay, what do I want to get out of this chapter or this reading? What am I looking for? What should I be underlining or highlighting, right? And then we want to go over our notes or review what we read because reviewing helps it stick in your head. As a visual learner myself, I need to visually see things so that I can be able to get them to stick in my head. Reading is essential to life. Yeah, I have some of my kids love to read books, others not so much, right? But I try to tell my kids who don't enjoy reading that, gosh, this is what helps us grow. Whether it's reading the newspaper, whether it's reading a magazine, whether it's reading books, or I love to read autobiographies of people. Their life story is fascinating to me, right? Whatever it is, you will grow by reading. When we talk about reading for school, we know that you demonstrate what you have learned in class when you take a test. So as you can see, the way we work this life management class, I provide you with the learning materials in the PowerPoint. I then myself try to describe it to you in another way and give you some examples to maybe help you understand more. And then we have a test on the material. And I give you an aid for that test. And your aid is your study guide. So your study guide is pretty much based on the exam questions. And so as a student, to be successful, you're going to focus on getting the right information from the PowerPoint, that's in red, to the study guide. You write it, take notes on the study guide. Then you will go over your study guide and memorize it and listen and watch the video that helps you prepare for the exam. And then you're ready for the exam. So the exam is having you demonstrate what you've learned in class. So reading. We do want to mark up our reading information. So think about if you have, a big chapter of 25 pages to read. If we don't do something to kind of mark what's important or most important, it's going to be overwhelming to just have 25 pages to read. One way to do that is what we call annotate. Annotating requires you to process information more carefully than just highlighting and underlining. What you do when you annotate is you actually take little notes, usually on the side margin or on a piece of paper if you're not writing in your book. And so you're trying to, like if your instructor gives you an example of, let's say, a time management, principle or practice, you might annotate and say, oh, I am going to schedule my exercise time in my day. I've never done that before. That's an example in your own words. Maybe you'll draw a symbol or something that makes sense to you. But annotating is making little notes about what you're reading. Highlight and underline, we want to do that. We want to read the section and identify what is the most important. For instance, I have specified in red here what is the most important in our learning information for you to be prepared for the exam. Those are the things that you're going to prioritize, right? And then again, make sure that we're taking notes throughout our reading. So think critically about what we read. Sometimes, have you ever had this happen where you read a page and then you close the book and you go, I don't know what I read. I know I read it, but I can't recall or remember anything that I just read. So we want to make sure that when we start our reading, your mind is focused and you're thinking critical about what you're reading. Applying what you read to your own life helps you to learn and remember information. Definitely. So even if you're reading about history or you're reading math, right? You're thinking, okay, I'm reading math and I want to be an auto mechanic. I want to fix air conditioning units. I want to be a plumber. I want to be a cosmetologist. I want to, cut hair. I want to do whatever I want to do. In most of those fields, you're going to need to know some math. You want to run a business. You want to do those things. We need some of those skills. And so think about, maybe you're struggling with the material, you don't like it, but think about how can it connect to my life so I can do it without hating it so much. All right, boost your efficiency. That means kind of how well you're reading, right? Set brief reading goals. In other words, if you have to read 25 pages, don't do it in one sitting. Break up your week or your time and say, okay, these are the days and times that I have 30 minutes to read. And I'm not going to sit there for 3 hours and read all the information. Right? Move around. Find your spot. What works for you? Sometimes I read outside just because being in the sun, being in the daylight helps me to feel good or feel better about what I'm doing. Increase your reading speed using a cue. What that means is when you have your read a book or read a line and you take your finger or you take a pencil or a ruler and you kind of are cueing what to read next. So you go like this, and it really helps us to not lose our place when we are reading a lot of information. Skimming. So skimming is really when we don't thoroughly read everything, we kind of skip a little bit. So we can get done faster because we're skipping. However, it's not really a good strategy for kind of getting it to sink in my head or understanding what I'm reading because I'm missing parts. All right, so review what you read. Recite the information. So state the information you've learned out loud. This is something people have a hard time with because they feel like it's weird to speak out loud. But if you're by yourself, do it. Speak out loud, right? Or if you're with other people or in an environment, in your head, kind of repeat what you just read. Because again, that's a process that helps your brain to kind of put it back into that long-term memory, which is where we want it to go. And so reciting the information helps you to remember it. And summarizing information basically means, okay, I read this one part of a chapter. Like, what's the overall idea? What's the central idea of what I read? Taking notes. So the first thing we want to do when we talk about taking notes, like if you're starting a class, you want to first and foremost look at your instructor's syllabus. All of you hopefully should definitely have your syllabus printed with you. It's kind of gold. Your syllabus for any class is key because it is outlining your instructor's expectations for you and what you can expect of your instructor. Office hours, if you can email them or text them, or how you communicate with your instructor. Is there a late policy? Can you make up exams? All of that is in the syllabus, and it's so important that we know what's said there. When you're hearing your instructor speak or you're listening to information, you want to resist the urge to try to think you can capture everything that's being said. You can't. You just can't. And so what you learn to do is pick out what's important. And part of that is paraphrasing. And paraphrasing is when you restate what you learned in your own words because they make more sense to you in your own words, right? So, if we talk about something like time management, right, you might restate it in your own words and say, I want to learn how to get everything done in a day, right? That's really what time management is. And so, but you're saying that's something that makes more sense to you. Right? So paraphrasing, using your own symbols or abbreviations for things to make sense to you. Right? Make sure that we ask questions. Mapping works best for visual learners. So when we take notes, I'll show you right now in a minute what it looks like. But mapping, for people like myself who learn visually, seeing things, it makes a lot of connections for us. So here is an example of mapping. So here you might see here how these different things are connected and they have a structure, bigger and smaller. And that's mapping. It's when you take something you're learning and you make it visual, and that visual kind of makes sense to you. And when you go into an exam, your brain kind of keeps that visual picture that you learned. And that works well for us visual learners. All right, memory and studying. So the human brain can forget information with normal wear and tear due to aging. So you're going to see this, or maybe you've been aware of it. Maybe you have grandparents or other individuals that you've spent time with, and you realize that they forget things. Even at my age, I forget things. This is a part of what happens to the brain as we get older. Our brain cells, neurons, die. They die the older we get. And so we don't process information as quickly as we used to. And we have a hard time recalling information. This is just normal. When we talk about long-term memory, remember we want to get the information into that long-term memory so we can pull it up when we need it for the exam or to use it later in life. Acronym, what's an acronym? An acronym is when we create a word based on the first letter of other words. So for instance, we learned before about SMART goals, S-M-A-R-T. And each of those S-M-A-R-T stands for a word. That's an acronym. To be productive in learning new material, space out our study time. Cramming information is never a good idea. So for instance, if you have an exam coming up, and you really weren't paying attention, you weren't going through the PowerPoint, you weren't doing all that. However, 3 hours before the exam, you sit down and you try to cram 4 chapters into your head right before the exam. That's not the best way to do that. Your brain doesn't work well that way. It works much better if we break up study time into smaller bits across multiple days. So if you review your study guide, like for an hour or 45 minutes one day, and then 2 days later you do it again. And then a few days later you do it again, or you do it every day, whatever works for you, but your brain is much better at it that way than trying to even write everything in the study guide right before the exam. All right, so let's see, talking about online classes, you want to make sure that you, again, have to be a little more motivated to complete our online classes. Set up an online study group. If you are challenged, in my particular class, under the discussions tab, I always have what we call student lounge. And the student lounge is a safe place that you can ask questions of your classmates or myself. So if you really just kind of say, I'm not understanding what this means, you can throw it out there and one of your classmates can respond, or I will respond. And it's a good way for us to continue to stay connected. All right, talking about the work environment, I think that one of the things I hope you'll all aspire to be is what we call a lifelong learner, which is basically somebody who just wants to continue learning even after school's done. Even if you don't go to college, you just really enjoy learning in the workplace. You enjoy listening to the news and learning about what's going on in the world. You're curious about things, right? Keeps building his or her knowledge with skills long after you've done your college work or whether or not you go to college. So we can improve not just through the classroom setting, right? There's things at work you can grow in that don't have to do with the classroom. And the benefits of being a lifelong learner help you to develop more skills. It makes you definitely more valuable to your company, right? Makes you more marketable if you decide to look for a new job or you want a promotion at the job you're at. You can tell your employer that, you know, I took this little online certificate, or I went to learn about this new tool we're using at work and nobody else here knows how to use it and I do. All of those, again, make you in a position to either climb up the ladder or ask for more money. Taking tests. Yeah, I know you're all excited to learn about this, right? Taking exams is something that can definitely bring on what we call test anxiety, right? So again, until you get to earning your doctorate degree down the road, pretty much tests are a part of life. Whether that's in the education field or even in the workplace, you might have to demonstrate to your employer that you can do something in some kind of an assessment test, right? So first thing first, know what is the exam going to look like? That's a big one. What is the exam going to look like? And that's why earlier in the semester, I actually gave you a quiz online so that you could see this is what it's going to be like to answer true, false questions or multiple choice questions online. I wanted to let you have that experience so that you could be prepared. When an instructor says that an exam is cumulative, what that word really means is it is going to cover all of the information from the very beginning of the semester. In this particular life management class, our exams are not cumulative. What we do is we break up the learning material into sections, and we learn a certain number of chapters, and we take an exam on those chapters. I really think it's much more difficult to expect students to really know everything from chapter 1 all the way up until the end of your learning material. And so it's not cumulative, but you may definitely have courses where that is the case. So what is test anxiety? It is when we get nervous or we are worried before, really during or after an exam, right? Some people have physical symptoms. Some people literally, their heart is pumping, they're getting sweaty, right? They just, oh my God, they're stressed out because they're taking an exam, and that is test anxiety. How can we manage this anxiety? Because this is common for many students. How do we manage it? Number one is going to be breathing. This is, again, go back to the 4-4-4-4 principle of breathing. When you breathe in, you count to 4. You then hold your breath for 4. You count to 4. You then let your breath out for 4. You then hold your breath again for 4. Then you start the process all over. So it's kind of like a square. I think of it as a box. And I breathe in, I hold it for 4. I then hold it for 4. I breathe out for 4. And then I hold it for 4 and I breathe in for 4. That's what we do. And what happens, it's going to slow your blood pumping through your body down. It's going to bring everything down, your heart racing, it's going to bring it down. Muscle relaxation. So definitely, sometimes maybe you need to stretch during an exam, right? You need to get up and stretch. You need to feel like, take that chance to relax your muscles. A big thing that's going to help you alleviate test anxiety is preparation. If you studied for the exam, then you can mentally tell yourself, I'm prepared. I don't need to be stressed. Now, if you didn't study, good reason to be stressed out, right? But if you did study your study guide and you're ready, then you can tell yourself mentally, I'm ready for whatever comes because I studied the right information, right? You're prepared. Turn your negative thoughts into positive ones, right? Meaning that, again, if you keep saying, oh, I'm going to bomb, I'm going to fail, this is going to be such a, I'm going to get an F in the class, all those thoughts are not good. So push them all the way and just say again, I prepared, I'm ready, I know what to expect because I took the quiz before, I took our first exam, I'm ready, let's go. Right? Visualize when you get your exam back and it says 90 plus on it, right? Use that visualization technique. So how do we reframe or change our negative thinking or our negative messages? So a negative thought might be, I'm going to forget everything I'm studied on for this exam. We might say, I'm well prepared and I know the material. Right? I'm terrible at taking tests. I'm getting better at taking tests. If I fail, I get kicked out of college. It's only one test, not my whole college career, right? You might say to yourself, I have extra credit I can do in this class to help me with my test scores, right? That's how you take the negative and make it into a positive. So make sure you do that. Test taking strategies, right? So think about when you're answering true, false questions, make sure to look out for when it says things like all. So typically when it says things like all, often it might be a false statement. They're including everything. When you look at multiple choice questions, one of the ways to approach multiple choice is to make sure that if you say to yourself, well, I know for sure C and D are not the right choice. So you cross out C and D, then you only have two to choose from, A and B, right? So cross out the incorrect ones. And then when you take a test, make sure to use all of your time, because students will do things like maybe they skip a question because they're going to come back to it, and then they forget to come back to it. So you don't want to leave that blank because it's incorrect. So, and then you want to review them again. Use all of your time. Taking tests with integrity, which means that the word integrity really means honor. It means be honest, don't cheat. That's what it means. Refrain from cheating means don't cheat, not only cheating your professor and your institution, but you cheat yourself because you didn't really study for the information. You don't have it when you leave the class, you won't know it. And things like organization, stress management, all these things, they help you in life, not just pass this class, but they're going to be great tools for your future. You want to learn them. Plagiarism. Plagiarism is when one person uses another person's words or ideas and presents them as their own. So when you're writing a paper, and if you use somebody else's words and you don't tell us you use somebody else's words, it's plagiarism. You will fail your class, possibly get kicked out of your college. It's a very serious offense. Now, it's okay to use somebody else's words and ideas as long as you give them credit, which means you have to use quotation marks and tell us who said this or whose idea is this, right? So make sure you do that. Sometimes you don't understand. Plagiarism is not always intentional. However, the consequences will be the same. You will fail and possibly be expelled from your school. So make sure you don't plagiarize, right? That's it. Okay, guys, this was a short chapter, but I will look forward to seeing you next time.